All right. Let's move to our guest, who I believe is here. Somebody's going to tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe our guest is here. Um, and as I said, this is
Yes,
part
this
of our
year.
series. All right, go ahead and pin us both, please. Um, this is part of our series to understand where the Democratic Party is, where it's headed, and we hope to speak to everybody who's running for the chair of the Democratic Party, as is our guest tonight. Noah, can you go ahead and pin him as well?
Here he is.
Hi there. How are you,
I don't
Mark?
know.
For having
I'm
me.
fine. I'm very grateful for you being here. For some reason, I don't see you, which I'm going to solve. Um, or maybe somebody can help me solve it. Um, all right. James Skoufis, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
You
Skoufis.
are. Well
All
done.
right. State Senator from New York, running for DNC chair. How's your campaign going so far?
It's been a whirlwind, but it's going exceptionally well. I think this is day 9 or 10 since I've announced. I have not been planning to do this for never mind years, like some others who are running, not even months. I began contemplating this shortly after the election, and so I'm clearly not a household name. Outside of New York, I'm on an introductory blitz with the 448 voting members of the DNC. I've reached out to many of them, and certainly there are many to come. But the message for me is quite simple: that at this moment in time, we need an aggressive outsider who knows how to win. And I come from a Trump plus 12 district. He's won my district 3 times over. I don't come into this contest with a long list of DNC relationships like some others. I certainly respect my competitors. But if we're going to bring the significant overhaul that I believe is needed to the DNC, someone who's been within the apparatus for years, if not decades, I think is unlikely to do that. Someone like myself, who again, aggressively outsider, knows how to win, and a fresh face, will throw out the old DC playbook and bring that change that I think is desperately needed.
What were you before you were a state senator?
I was in the lower house, the assembly, for
Yeah.
six
All
years.
right. What were you before that? Have you been in government
Uh,
your whole career?
yeah, so I was in project management for a bit, several years after college. I'm obviously not all that old. And so I was commuting down into the city and non-political. I was on my town board as
Yeah.
well.
Did you grow up in the district you represent now?
I grew up in the district, yes. I'm originally from public housing in Flushing, Queens, but have lived most of my life in the
Yeah.
district.
Have you ever worked in Washington?
I went to school at GW, and
Okay.
so I was an intern for former Congressman John Hall way back when. I don't think that
Yeah.
counts as quote unquote
Yeah.
working in Washington. And so
Yeah.
I am very much the outsider, like I said, in this
Yeah.
race.
So let's say I'm a steel worker from Pennsylvania, and I say, uh, Senator, I voted for Obama twice. I voted for Hillary Clinton. I voted for Joe Biden in 20, and I voted for Trump in 24. And I voted for Trump because of immigration and inflation. And I see no indication that your party has a clue what to do about those issues. What would you say to that person?
Yeah, so as DNC chair, I say to that person, I go to them with contrition and explain to them, we have not lived up to your expectations as a National Democratic Party, and we are going to do better. And instead of telling you that the economy is doing wonderfully and pushing white paper talking points from think tanks about, how our GDP is a little bit better than other countries, and so everything's wonderful, we need to do a lot more listening and a lot less lecturing, and we are going to do better. And no, if you care about border security, you're not racist. The next iteration of the Democratic Party is going to be responsive. And you look at those candidates who broke from what I'll call the stale Democratic script, these talking points that are handed down from the campaign committee arms, like Ruben Gallego. He engaged on this issue. He went and sought and received the Border Patrol Union's endorsement. And guess what? He won, and the top of the ticket lost in Arizona. And so I'd be going to folks like exactly the person you're describing, the firefighters union, the Teamsters, the college campus activists. It's both moderates and the left, where the big, once former large Democratic tent has frayed on both ends, and ask folks to give us another shot. We're going to do better. We're going to be listening more.
So one of the things the state party chair does, or national party chair does, is critique the incumbent president of the other party. CBS News just reported that Donald Trump has invited President Xi of China to attend the inauguration. What do you think of that? Speak as a prospective DNC chair. Good, bad, indifferent? What do you think of that?
I think it's remarkable that the man who wouldn't even show up and attend Joe Biden's inauguration is inviting dictators and quasi-dictators to his own inauguration. This is what we're going to see a lot of over the next 4 years. The American people, it's going to be crystal clear, the circus that will be this next administration. You have a wrestling executive running the education department, potentially. You've got an anti-vaxxer running the nation's health system. And so it's up to the next DNC chair and the National Democratic Party, yes, to underscore the circus and the harm that will be coming out of the administration. But it's also important that we're not just the anti-Trump party. We have to stand for something, and that something has to be working class values every single day at the core of our message.
Okay, this is a hypothetical, but we're here to sort of kick the tires on your abilities, right? Let's say you just gave that answer. You didn't know that Trump had done that, I assume, unless you're watching your phone like I am, right? So
I just came out of 2 interviews, and
so you get so your gut response was, besides to criticize some other aspects of Trump, was to say he shouldn't invite a dictator to his inauguration, right? Right? That was one of the things you said.
Yes.
Okay. So what if I told you that Joe Biden invited Xi to his inauguration 4 years ago? What would you say? And that's a hypothetical, but what would you say then if you were confronted with that? What would you say?
I don't believe he did. And so I don't.
But you answered without knowing. You answered without knowing. You don't know that he did or not.
So here's what I'll say. That I even though no one put a fact in front of my face that Joe Biden did not invite this guy, President Xi, I know Joe Biden well enough as a citizen, as an elected official, to know that he would never invite someone like that.
Okay. What have you reaction been to your call? How many DNC members have you talked to? They're the electorate here. How many have you talked to roughly?
I'd say a little north of 100 so far.
And what's been their reaction?
The reaction has, I'd say there's a spectrum. 90% fall within this range of either intrigued, this is interesting, I want to hear more from this guy, he's got an attractive message, to, on the other end, a full subscriber to the message. Now, look, again, I'm introducing myself to the vast majority of these 448 DNC members. There have been quite a number of them who have told me, who have heard from all 4 candidates at this point, the election was today, you've got my vote. Now, there's a lot of time between now and February 1st. There's also a lot of folks who I have yet to speak with. I was out in Arizona for the Association of State Democratic Committees. I'm in Washington the next couple of days for the rules and e-board meetings. And so I am on an auto dialer, basically. The response has been exceptionally positive. But again, I don't walk into this with relationships as long as my arm, like some of the other contenders within the DNC who've been around for 5, 10, 15 years within the apparatus. But so far, I'd say the first week and a half, we've begun to build significant support that we're obviously going to look to continue to build.
All right, please, if you want to ask the senator a question, please raise your hand. I'm going to turn it over to you folks in just a moment. Senator, raising money is a big part of being DNC chairman. How will someone of your lack of relationships with the biggest donors in the party, how will you do that?
So let me say 2 things. First, if you ask around New York, it's subjective to say that I'm one of the strongest fundraisers in New York State politics, to the extent that in a Trump plus 12 district, the state Senate campaign arm does not have to spend a dime in my races. So I know how to have these conversations with donors. But what's equally, if not more important, is that I've spoken with DNC donors who have told me point blank they are not giving another red cent to the DNC unless there's a significant overhaul. And I spoke with a DNC member in Arizona several days ago who told me, obviously a battleground state, in the heat of the campaign, she was receiving upwards of 16 glossy mailers a day, daily, from the National Democrats. And I've run enough campaigns that I've all won to know there's nothing that 16th mailer is doing that the 15th mailer is not doing. But that underscores underscores sort of the chokehold that the DC consultant class has on the DNC. And so I'm going to be well positioned. I would argue I'm uniquely positioned to tell that consultant class, no, we're not doing this anymore. To tell, the folks who I'm referring to as the cocktail circuit in Washington, no, you're not ripping off our party anymore like hogs at a trough. We're going to be reorienting this money to the party loyalists in the trenches, the state committees, the county committees, local committees, our friends in organized labor, new partnerships. That's where we move the needle. The folks on the ground, human to human, we need to rebuild the trust with in a lot of these communities.
Senator, I thought you could stay with us longer than apparently you can. So I want to bring in folks now. I'll hold the rest of my questions for another time. Sue lives in Colorado. She was a big supporter of the Democratic Party, but she's drifted away a bit. So she's the perfect person to kick the tires on Senator Skoufis. Sue, go ahead. Oh, sorry. Unmute. I apologize. You need to unmute. There you go. Nope. One more time. One more time.
You could do it, Sue.
You got it. Go ahead. You're good.
Yes, I am a former Democrat. I left the Democratic Party because I felt like the Democratic Party had gaslighted me about Joe Biden's situation. I stopped giving money to the Democratic Party, to the Harris campaign. I think the DNC chair has to be a fighter, has to be authentic, has to recruit better candidates who are authentic. But also what the DNC, the whole Democratic Party has to do right now is to come clean on when, where everybody knew that Joe Biden was not capable of doing the job. He is basically just, abdicated right now. Trump is, for all intents and purposes, the president of the United States right now. When is the Democratic Party going to come out and be honest with the people that they want back in the party fold about what's going on in Washington? Every talking head on TV, oh, he's, as sharp as ever. No, he wasn't. That is my biggest issue right now with the Democratic Party.
Yeah, heard loudly and clearly. And the first thing that I would tell you as chair, Sue, is that I want you back in the party. And to the extent that you lost faith in our party, I'm committed, and the next iteration of the DNC, the National Party, ought to be committed to getting folks just like you back under our once big Democratic tent. I will tell you this. There are 4 or 5, I forget if, there's been 1 or 2 others who have entered the race now, candidates for DNC chair. This question, as you can imagine, has been incessantly asked of all of us by different media outlets. Do you think Joe Biden should have withdrawn from the race sooner? You're speaking with the only DNC candidate who is answering that question in a straightforward manner. And the answer is a one-word answer, and it's very simple. And the answer is yes. Any other answer is obfuscating, it's dodging, it's putting your head in the sand. And so I hear you loudly and clearly, and the Democratic Party should own that. We need to, as I said before, go to some folks like yourself with contrition and tell you and others, we need to do better. And on this issue, if you can't answer a question like this as a DNC chair candidate that is so top of mind for not just you, not just thousands, I'd say millions of Democrats and former Democrats, then I don't know how you're going to go on Fox News and into red communities and have conversations. I'm on Fox News Radio tomorrow. And that's because part of my campaign is very clearly that I am well situated to go into traditionally uncomfortable settings for most national Democrats and have conversations just like this with voters like yourself.
Sue, thank you. Matthew, we want to try to get as many folks as we can. Matthew, question for the senator.
Yeah, hi. Am I off mute? Yes.
You're good.
Hi, Senator. How are you? So I'm from New York State as well. I recognize your name. I've had quite a significant amount of dealings with the New York State legislature because I happen to be in a lawyer for the cannabis industry in New York State. I'm also a lifelong Democrat. I too have gotten, much like Sue, alienated from the Democratic Party. I have never until this election, I had never not voted for the top of the ticket for president. In this particular election, I wrote in Richie Torres and John Fetterman. The conjunction of those two candidates can probably explain to you why. What I think the problem with the Democratic Party is, and I think that, by the way, it's the same symptom in New York State that you've probably confronted in the legislature. It is the increasing influence of a strident and vociferous but unrepresentative left wing of the party. They call themselves progressive. I regard them as regressive. I would like to understand what you intend to do. And they've alienated a wide swath of voters. If you look at, I'm going to give you, apart from the issue of Israel, which is obviously very important to me, I'm going to read something to you from my former law professor today, Elizabeth Warren. And this is about, by the way, the shooting of the CEO of United Healthcare.
I think I know what you're about to read, but go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, violence is never the answer, but you can only push people so far, and then they start to take matters into their own hands, appearing to condone what actually transpired. This is something that is alienated the entire party. So I would like to understand, if you're going to ask me what my question is, I would like to understand what you plan to do with regard to the increasing influence of an unrepresentative left wing.
Great question, Matthew. That's awesome. Thank you. Sorry to cut you off. I want to get in as many people as we can before the senators to go. Senator, please.
So what you just read back to me, I think is unacceptable. To answer your question, look, the DNC chair is not a policy-making position. I don't come into the DNC's role imposing my ideology on the rest of the party. My role, or at least a central role, is to rebuild the once big Democratic tent. We have not dominated in an election, in national election, in 16 years. You have to go back to 2008 since we had a large coalition that dominated in a national election. And so I'm not running for this position to kick anybody out of the party, kick anybody from out under the tent. But I'm also someone who is going to be able to come into this position and hopefully explain to people that we ought to be less interested, for example, in categorizing voters into different identity buckets and more interested in putting forward our working class values and honing in on those issues that, quite frankly, we didn't emphasize nearly enough. Everyone knows where the Democratic Party and the Republican Party stands on abortion. We did not need to send out 9,000 mailers and spend hundreds of millions of dollars on TV ads letting people know where the two parties stand on abortion. Conversely, I met a lot of voters who weren't quite clear on where we stood, if we stood anywhere as a national party, on other salient issues like affordability, like the border, like public safety. And so I've always leaned into that in my races. I know how to run those types of campaigns in difficult territory. And look, I think that we have to, as national Democrats, we've fallen into this trap of oftentimes speaking in overly academic terms, in trying to be overly politically correct. And a lot of voters perceive us as being more interested in running for, chancellor of a small liberal arts college than for public office. And so you're not going to see me doing that. We need to get back to a message and speaking on issues that are relatable to people, speaking in a manner that folks speak with their neighbors and their colleagues and their friends and their family. Right now, we're not doing that as national Democrats.
Matthew, thank you. Brett, go ahead, please.
Quick, easy question, I hope. Imagine you could take a time machine back to 2016. You have the choice of doing what the DNC did and pushing out Bernie Sanders when they had Hillary Clinton, and then to 2020 when they didn't hold a primary and blackball RFK Jr., who probably could have beat, 2024, who probably could have beat Donald Trump in the general election, but wasn't allowed to run. As DNC chair, what do you do to prevent things like that from happening and regain trust of members of your own party and not just people looking in and seeing what's happening?
Yeah, so I'm going to respectfully disagree on your point about RFK Jr. I do not think he would have even been competitive as a general election candidate. What I can say is that the DNC, the next DNC chair, should not be putting his or her thumb on the scale for any candidate when there's an open primary, as we expect in 2028.
James, your folks say you got to go. Brett, thank you for the question. I hope you'll come back. I hope you appreciated this forum. We'd love to come back. I got a million more questions
This
for
has
you.
been great. Yeah.
but super impressed. I got to say, super impressed. I'd watched some video of you. I can't say I make you the absolute front runner, but really grateful to you for making
I'm working
time
on that,
and,
though.
and for sharing and tell your folks you want to come back because I'll listen to you.
Great.
Thank you
very much,
thank you
Mark.
for doing it. Appreciate
Yeah.
it. Thank you, Senator. All right. And Brett, thank you for the question, and thanks Sue and the others who asked questions. Again, we thought he could stay with us longer, and it's unfortunate, but I thought it was great.